we are a family company, and there is a recurring problem with family companies with future generations. Typically in Montana, that happens in ranches. Grandpa started the ranch and it grew up, and the son runs it, and they have a property worth $1 million there, and then they have kids that have grown up and live in California, and they wonder what's going on at home. There's a distrust that can arise in these generational problems. And there's a school, Kellogg University of Illinois State, I think.
Northwestern
University.
That has a family business program, and a few of us, and total eventually, I think 11 of us from Wyo-Ben attended this. And a week-long course, and you sit down and you hear from somebody like from the New York Times, which is a family business, it was at that time, and the one that makes a good whiskey, I forgot the name of it. But they sit down and they tell you about problems which you're experiencing with this distrust, because there are owners of the company who are not participating and don't have information, and there are ways of remedying it. And one of the ways that they suggested that is that you can have a board with independent board members, and preferably a majority, and that takes away this possibility of that they're taking advantage of us.
If you pick people that have skills and knowledge that can help you strategically, can help you grow and add value, those are things you generally or may not get in a family board. So if you bring in people from industry that have backgrounds, fill needs that we have at the board level, it can accelerate your growth and add great value to the shareholders. So how do we go about finding people to serve on the board? The way we did it, first of all, we recognized that inviting our friends on the board was not the way to do it. You know, we don't invite our banker, we don't invite our auditor, and those kind of people. We engaged a consultant that deals exclusively with family businesses. And we asked them to help us recruit qualified board members. We gave them the guardrails of what we wanted, what we felt we needed, what would match well with where the company was at the time, and the gaps that we had in some of those, the board knowledge. And then they went out in their database and also contacted individuals directly, said, here is the Wyo-Ben prospectus, do you have an interest in looking at this? And I think we gathered, or the consultant gathered, maybe a dozen resumes, people that had shown interest. They did the due diligence on that. They reduced it to about half, and they brought those to us. And we conducted phone interviews, and from that we selected 3 that we wanted to bring in and do personal interviews.
One thing that happened prior to the advent of the independents was we found ourselves as a board, because we were all family members with the exception of one stockholding employee, that we were spending more and more time on family matters and less time on important business matters at the board level. So as a board, we weren't really functioning the way a good board should, and we knew that that needed to be changed, and we'd heard at Kellogg that having independence on the board was a good way to do that, a good way to help drive that forward. And as David said, if you can get independents that have skill sets that you need, that complement what you need to do or want to do, that can help drive progress for for the company.
Obviously, we're looking for relevancy in information as we're trying to move the company forward, make decisions. That doesn't mean that somebody that's retired doesn't add value to the board. I think it's really important that we periodically make an assessment, we being the company, as to where are we at strategically, where do we need to go, and what gaps may have presented themselves at the board level that we need to be filling. And that may be that one of the board members that has been active and helped us for a lot of years leaves the board and makes room for somebody else that comes in with those skill sets.
You know, that at times that's a little difficult to even talk about because the impact, I believe, on our father was one of the things that precipitated his illness, his ALS. We are very fond of saying, with a great deal of truthfulness, that Wyo-Ben is a family, not a family business. That's now, and that was the case then. He took that seriously. In 1981-82, we had 360 employees. By the time 86 hit, we had about 85, thereabouts. That paring down, which we did much more slowly than was prudent, because we were trying to save jobs, trying to save people, trying to husband our resources, expecting obviously that this wasn't going to last forever, and trying to continue what was felt to be the obligation to our employees for that job. And that paring down had a huge impact on him. All of it was significantly adverse. Anytime you're going through something like that, there's very little that you can say good about it. The good part was those that remained were willing to continue, even though salaries dropped, wages dropped, everything got squeezed. We worked hard to learn how to do things differently and more efficiently and more effectively. Now, and going back 20 years ago, we were successful enough. We produced as much material, as much product as we had produced prior to the downturn with a third of the people.
The very early days, I have to rely on the stories that I hear, and the story that I heard was that Rockwood Brown Sr., my grandfather, was a pretty tough guy, and Dad had come back from the war, World War II, got involved with concrete products, was running that, and Grandpa Brown said to Dad, somebody's got to do something with this bentonite. And Dad said, well, I'm really busy making concrete blocks. And he ended up doing something with the bentonite. So there must be something in there that I didn't fully understand about Grandpa Brown, but he convinced him to get engaged with the bentonite operation. And, you know, I saw my dad, and I remember really all of these steps, because I, from a young age, would work at the company. My very first job was cutting the grass at the block plant. And I don't remember how old I was, but I probably was 10 years old, something like that. And it was a tough job. cutting the ditch bank. You remember that.
Oh, I do.
Um, and then the block plant moved. Dad moved the block plant, and they moved it to out on Hesper. And the business started to evolve into something bigger. It was more than just making blocks. It was all of the masonry things that you need to do masonry construction. And I worked out there. Wasn't even old enough to drive. I got dropped off and then picked up. And my very first job out there was unloading boxcars full of cement. It wasn't on pallets. You had to pick up the bags at the end of the boxcar, bring them to the door, and put them on a pallet. And then I had to flag somebody to come and get it with a forklift because I wasn't old enough to drive the forklift. It was character building for sure.
I didn't know that you had been doing the same thing, because that was exactly what Dad had me doing at 25 cents an hour when I was 14 years old, doing that in the morning and repairing broken shipping pallets in the afternoon. And it was all about character building, teaching a sense of responsibility and the value of a dollar.
25 cents.
But
What I earned at the stockyard.
Years before.
Years before, you would have thought there'd been some inflation.
You would have hoped, wouldn't you?
But I remember so vividly the trips that I'd take with Dad to Wyoming.
Yeah.
And it was a full day thing. And again, I don't remember how old I was. I was fairly young. But he was always pointing out the bentonite deposits, or we'd get down to the plant or the office, and he'd have a meeting, and I'd kind of sit over in the corner waiting for the meeting to finish. But it was this time on the road, and it was a time for us to talk. And I really learned, I think, I didn't realize it, but I learned, I learned what he did. I learned, and I could observe how people related to him, respected him. And I could see that he really loved what he did, and he loved the people. And I think it was those really kind of formative years for me that created this attachment that I had going forward. I didn't have to come back and work at Wyo-Ben. Dad never said, I want you to come back. It was always my choice. And I was in Washington State and made the decision to come back. But Dad certainly instilled a lot of those values in both of us as we were growing up about the business.
The trips down to Wyoming are something I remember very fondly as well. Our father, I think of in terms, people often relate to Ronald Reagan, the great communicator. He loved to talk. In fact, on those trips, you really didn't have to do a whole lot of talking yourself, because he would talk. And you just kept silent and learned from what he would say. Which made the advent of his ALS later on all the more poignant, because the first thing he lost was the capability of speech. But I also saw how he treated people in Wyoming and here at the office, and the respect that he had from everybody that worked for us. It was just his way of doing things. That, to this day, resonates.